As most of you are now aware, earlier today, ISIS attacked when 2 bombs were set off in Brussels. 31 people are dead and 180 are injured. One eyewitness described the scene as blood and chaos. France has previously stated in no uncertain terms that they are at war since the Paris attacks in November. I will quote my colleague Farrah who joins me today. Let's pray for God to accept our dead, heal our injured, and for our aim to be mighty. I'm Anthony Chioza. With me today, as always, is Farrah Prudence. Farrah escaped Islam has been on a quest to explain the dangers of Islam to the Western world. She has a fatwa, or judgment, out for her execution. Farrah, I know these events in Brussels must be especially difficult for you to witness. For those viewers that don't know your background, could you please explain why this fatwa is on your head?
Well, they are very difficult to witness. It's very difficult for me today. Like I said, I woke up to my phone ringing off the hook, and I'm opening up my phone and I see everybody saying, turn your TV on, Europe is under attack, and for me to get up and watch it is quite disturbing, just like it was for millions of people around the world, I'm sure. I have a fatwa on my head because at the age of 17, I left Islam and I left my very abusive Muslim father along with my family. Because of that, I have been declared an apostate, or in Arabic it's called murtad, somebody who leaves the religion of Islam. Muhammad, who is the prophet of Islam, who's in the Quran there's over 60 verses. Quran is the holy book of Muslims that command Muslims to obey Muhammad. And Muhammad had said that apostates must be killed. There are only 3 times or 3 situations where a Muslim can be killed. 1, a Muslim who committed adultery. 2, a Muslim who murdered another Muslim. And 3, a Muslim who left Islam.
Well, just based on today's events, do you believe that Europe are they at war with Islamic extremism, or is France at war, or is Europe at war with Islam? Is it Islamic extremism, or is it Islam?
Islam is the one that is at war with anything that is not Islamic. Islam is in fact at war with Islam. Muslims will declare each other non-Muslims and kill each other nowadays because that is allowed. You see it between Sunnis and Shias. You see it even within the Sunni community. There are just beheadings on the street apparently right now in the Middle East. Islam is at war with the world, and they have been at war with the world for the last 1400 years since their inception. Muhammad himself has been in at least 27 battles, of which most of them are offensive battles. So they've been at war with the world.
Is Europe aware that they're at war with Islam?
Whether they like to admit it or not, they should be aware. Let me answer it this way. They should be aware. At this point, if somebody's already broken into your house and is burning half of it down and you're still snoozing or you're still pretending to be asleep, that's not really the person's problem who's broken into your house. At that point, it's your problem. You're the one at fault.
So, can this war be won if Europe and the rest of the West, if they cannot name the enemy, can the war be won?
I'm glad you asked that, Anthony, because this is something that I have been talking about for years now. Unless you can identify your enemy, you cannot fight your enemy. You don't know what you're fighting unless you identify who you're fighting. We are at war with Islam. The same Islam that hit 9/11, the same Islam whose pirates used to take our ships back at the conception of our country when John Adams and Thomas Jefferson met with the Muslims, and the Muslims told them that they were taking over our ships and our men and our people because their God and their prophet told them to. This is the same Islam that raped Europe When you go into Spain, when they went into Turkey, this is the same Islam that the Crusades were sent out to try and defend the Holy Land against. This is the same Islam that beheaded and killed and raped hundreds of Jews just under Muhammad, and then thousands after he died. This is the same Islam. It hasn't changed. The last caliphate, Anthony, didn't really go away. People think that it's ancient history, but the last caliphate didn't dissolve until about 1928 or 1929, so this is really recent history. This is just a reincarnation of the first nightmare that took over the world.
When I listen to your words, I find it ironic when I pick up the Washington Post and I look at the headline today and it reads, Congress responds to the Brussels attack with condolences, but no concrete plans. Farrah, the West is very uncomfortable with the idea of naming Islam as an enemy, as you are so ready to do. This is a problem because, of course, that kind of act, that would require the government to take some kind of an action. Farrah, what will the Western governments have to do if they really want to stop this?
They are going to have to completely get rid of their political correctness to start. That would be a good start. We need to be able to identify the enemy, understand that it's not our fault. This is kind of, I know you're a fan, Dr. Bill Warner used the best term to describe it. We're a battered woman. That is what we are. We act like a battered woman. We have a battered woman syndrome. Every time Islam attacks us, we think that somehow it's our fault. Somehow we weren't good enough. Today, this morning on Fox News, I heard one of the commentators, and I actually don't know who it was, so forgive me, who was saying, we need to include Muslims in our society and make them feel like they are loved in our society and they're part of the society so they don't turn on us. Whoever that was needs to shut up and sit down. And I'm sorry if it comes off as blunt, but shut up. You're not doing anybody any favors. Islam is not attacking people because somebody lost too many hugs as a child. Islam is attacking people because it's a doctrine. You can't love on someone that's taught hate. Congress in the United States is going to have to give a firm response. There was a time where evil was afraid of us. There was a time that people thought we just don't want the United States to interfere because they will obliterate us. And unless we give that kind of a statement, that kind of a response, unless we level it, it will not be learned. Hopefully, we'll only have to do it once, and they will learn their lesson. But unless somebody else comes up and says, this will not be tolerated, instead of giving out more aid and more money to go to these countries that harbor terrorists and bring in more of these so-called refugees. We are at war. We need to start acting like we're at war. And we need to take the handcuffs off of our soldiers, Anthony. We have rules of engagements that really prevent our soldiers from engaging with the enemy, and we're sending them off to die and to lose the battle before they've even gone into it.
I'm thinking specifically now here at home. We have an Islamic population here in this country. And if the enemy is not radical Islam and the enemy is Islam, there's no way from the perspective of many to balance the classical liberal ideals guaranteed by the United States while forcing a segment of our population perhaps out of the country. People don't want to see a repeat of the Japanese internment camps under the administration of FDR or worse.
Absolutely.
Do you see a way to do this without massive constitutional violations?
Of course. We have to declassify Islam as a religion. That's the part, it's kind of like, that's the part that they twist our arms with. That Islam is a religion, therefore they have a freedom of religion. Let me ask you this, Anthony. If the Nazis had a god and a prophet, would we have still treated it as a religion? Do you think it would be more tolerated?
Well, in this country now, In Germany, no, obviously not, and they were on the road to doing that. I think here in this country now, if you ask somebody, they might say yes.
We need to stop with the whole religious aspect of it. Islam has a strict political doctrine. They have a strict law system. And they have an example of a man who has brutalized many, many people in his time, and many have been brutalized in his name ever since. First of all, my answer is we need to declassify Islam as a religion. If they would like to reform Islam and wipe out Muhammad from Islam and take out a good chunk out of the Quran, then they can still practice their religion, but I would argue that they have nothing left to practice. The truth is, Islam is not a race. What happened to the Japanese was awful because the Japanese are a race and they can have a loyalty to the United States. But in Islam, they are forbidden to have a loyalty to the kafir. The kafir is the non-believer or the infidel. For example, chapter 25, verse 52 of the Quran says, "So do not obey the disbelievers and strive against them with a great striving." And that's the translation, Anthony. The actual word is wajahidhum. It means, and carry out a great jihad against them. They are not allowed to obey our laws. They are actually not allowed to befriend us. I'm not going to read all of it right now, but there are several verses in the Quran. You can look them up. Chapter 4, verse 89. Chapter 5, verse 51. Chapter 4, verse 144. All of them say, do not befriend the kuffar, the non-believers.
So what I hear you saying is that Islam is not a religion, but it's more of a floating political ideology that is not restricted by a border. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. It is also in the Quran that they truly believe, because it is in the Quran, that their God gave them dominance and gave them authority over lands they have not treaded yet. It says that in the Quran. And unfortunately, I don't have the verse in front of me, but that we will put it up in the link in the article. They have authority over these lands, and that's any land they have not even dominated yet. You know, the Quran says we will inherit the earth, and that is the Muslims. The earth is theirs, and that it is God's will, or their God's will, that Islam dominates the world. So Muslims are being true Muslims are being non-American Muslims are being very clear about this. ISIS, the one thing that I'm actually going to give them credit right now. They have not lied. They have been very upfront and honest with us about what their intentions are. The people who have lied are people like CARE, the Center for American Islamic Relations. The people who have lied are people like the OIC, the Organization for Islamic Relations that goes around the world. Those are the people that have lied. Those are the Muslims that live here in the United States and in Europe. And if you notice, Anthony, those are the same people that harbored the terrorists and give them aid.
Now, do you believe that we need to amend the Constitution and get rid of freedom for all religion, or is there some kind of do we need an amendment that's more nuanced that deciphers between something that's a political ideology and something that is spiritual?
We just need to declassify Islam as a religion. I absolutely do not agree with going after anybody for their religion. Islam itself is not a religion. It should not have the protections of a religion. Just like the KKK, just because they go around with a cross doesn't make them Christians. They don't have any protection under the law. Neither should Islam or Muslims. They should have no protection under the law. Especially, a lot of these attacks and what's going on, they know about it. If their families can't determine whether or not they're about to go and kill someone, and their mosques can't determine, like San Bernardino, for example, that he's about to go and kill a bunch of people, then I don't think we should take a chance. I don't think we should be playing Russian roulette with people who grow up learning to kill the Jews and to attack us.
How long do you think it'll be before contemporary liberals agree with your reasoning? How much more violence do you think it's going to take?
Well, you used a key word there, and that's reasoning. The contemporary liberals don't use reasoning and logic. I have been dealing today, for example, with people who, like I said before, say, give them hugs and fight war with love and all of these ideas that seem to belong more in a children's cartoon on Sunday morning. When we're dealing with reality, evil must be fought. Evil must be destroyed. And the only way to do that is to take action against them. And that action is not going to be, well, maybe we should talk about it and, have a group hug. That action is going to have to be a military action. It's going to have a strict military action because unless we take a stand and we make a statement, we will continue to get trampled on. It's been in history. No country has ever stopped somebody, whether Muslims or not Muslims, from trying to come in and fight them by saying, hey, let's just hug it out. That's never happened. Never. Not even European countries when they were invading each other. It never happened where the English and the French just kind of hugged it out and it was all okay. And another thing that people have to understand is that we need to stop blaming American foreign policy. We need to stop blaming European policy. Islam has been attacking the world for the last 1400 years, long before anybody bullied the little Muslim who made that so-called clock, long before anybody was ever criticized for wearing a hijab, long before Obama or Clinton or George Bush Sr. ever went into the Middle East. So there is a problem, and the problem is not us.
So I want to turn to a kind of broader question now. Is there any chance for this to be resolved as a union? Or do you think this issue and others, just with the way politics is going right now, will fracture the union of the 50 states in the future?
I think the unions are already fractured, Anthony. I think they're holding on by a very, very thin thread at this point. You have a lot of the governors that are trying to take a stand against these so-called refugees coming in. That has been an immense pressure on states to accept these refugees, and I do see a battle on the horizon. Whether it's a legal battle or whether it's a literal battle, I'm not quite sure. But I don't know how much more oppression the American people are going to take. We're kind of, the federal government is, as well as this administration, is stepping on the spring, and I think they're pushing it too far, because that spring, it's going to bounce back up. And I hope that when it bounces back up, it just doesn't hurt anybody.
Okay, Farrah. Well, I appreciate your opinion. So on that note, we will conclude our 11th Vox Shot episode. Please pray for the souls of the dead and those that committed these acts of violence, that they are freed from the darkness and come to walk in the light with Jesus Christ. We'd also ask you to pray for our friend, Inez Annie Cyrus. You see her with Farrah in the videos on Islam every Friday. She's having some heart problems and she will need to take a rest, but she is going to continue her work as she can. If you enjoy listening to Vox Shot and reading Vox Populi news, please consider going to our donations tab so we can continue to bring you news, analysis, and breaking stories you won't hear or read anywhere else. Please remember to like and share this podcast on Facebook and other social media sites. Have a good evening, and remember, you are the voice of the people.